why does Centrique even matter?
Why does Centrique even matter? As an individual entity, I don't think it does. I don't think the club itself means anything. That was something that I always felt from the beginning. There was a point where I cared more about the magazine than the people, and I had to stop and realize that the people are going to be way more important in the end than the product. The product will deteriorate over time. The glue doesn't hold up, the pages start to wear down. And I think the reason Centrique matters is because it allows a space for people to feel seen and accepted and heard.
The first day I ever came, I was like, this is my club. And I feel like it matters because it's how you get all of the stories and what's happening on campus, like the true raw parts of it. And it sounds kind of cliche, but like a home almost. I feel like I made all of my friends at Centrique, and I feel like that's like where I found my place, especially when I've never been to Carthage before, you know.
Honestly, I feel like Centrique matters because, like, generally speaking, I feel like people need like a home on campus, you know, having like a place where they feel like comfortable and safe. And I think that Centrique kind of does that for a lot of people, at least the people that I know that are in the club, including myself.
To me, individually, it matters because of the amazing experience I got to spend time with all these really cool people. As an organization on campus, I think Centrique fills a space that is generally left empty. I feel like a lot of the deep discussions happening on campus happen within a class or within, I mean, I'm not part of this, so I'm not sure, but within like a fraternity or sorority. Centrique is a timestamp of the current climate, the current student body on campus, and you know, even 50 years after Centrique was founded, we still look back on those magazines and on the people who were part of them.
To be completely honest, it's the people. When I come in, even when I'm not feeling the best, I'll come in and then I see all these people putting in all the work and efforts, and they're like, oh my God, did you see this submission or this submission? And what do you feel about this and this? Well, I have an opinion for everything, and it's really nice.
I love you guys.
I think what makes it worth it is all the people who've submitted, because you look at the people who submitted and they have some great things that we decided to put in the magazine, and it can kind of get washed out in all of the like late nights spent in the library. When we really think about it, there are a bunch of people who put their stuff out there, and it's going to be published in a magazine that other people can see, and we're allowing people to express themselves and their creativity.
For me, it was just a way of giving people kind of a chance to be creative and express their creativity, right? So I like that it's not all just one thing, right? And it's also kind of a community building tool, right? When you can see something that, you know, the peers in your grade created, or, you know, oh, I go to class with this person and they've created this beautiful design piece and now it's like published in a book. it's really important for the creators, and I think it's important for the community as well to be able to see, like, you know, that sense of community, that sense of creation coming together. And that's what I loved about Centrique so much. So when I was in high school, I took some courses at the local community college, and I joined their literary club, and I loved it because it was very similar with, you know, sharing like stories and poetry and some artwork. And I absolutely fell in love with what I did there. Like, that was literally one of the happiest times of my life, was just working on that. So I got to Carthage, and I'd heard about Centrique, and I went to the org fair, and it wasn't there. So, like, I set out for two things. I set out looking for the graphic design club, and I set out looking for a Centrique. And I found Draft. You know, it's a great club. Shout out to them. But I couldn't find Centrique anywhere. And I was like, okay, like, I'll just wait for them to post posters and, you know, kind of like put out information. And they never did. So the next year comes, and I'm looking for them again at the org fair, and they're still not there. So I reached out to Rick Meyer because I was able to find that he was the advisor. So I reached out, and I was like, does this club exist? Like, I've been trying for a year now to find out anything about it, and like, I can't, you know? So he's like, oh yeah, that kind of took a break. They don't really exist anymore, but like, if you want to do something, sure, go for it. So I did. I rebranded the whole thing. Like, I created a logo, I created a brand identity, and I made it like yellow so that it stood out from all the other clubs. You know, there's a lot of red on campus, obviously. So just, I try to just create this full identity. I got the social media running. I got the email up and running again, which that was a process as well. It was my baby, and it was such a fun, like, passion project. And so I was able to convince, like, my roommates and some of my other friends in my writing and design classes to submit things and to, like, join and be part of the board. And yeah, slowly we started getting people that would, you know, come to meetings, or like we would do some events. So we did like a like wine, like paint and sip, but instead of wine, we did like the sparkling juices. I had to create it because I had something similar to it before, and I needed it again. And then of course, you know, as I'm doing all this stuff for Centrique, I find out that the first issue was published like 50 years before. And I was like, this is a great opportunity to not only, like, you know, market Centrique, but really, like, bring it back, get submissions, make a big deal out of this important part of, like, Carthage.
Wilma Tague was our creative writing class, and I think it was probably in maybe 1967 that we were, a group of us who were in her creative writing class. She professor of English at Carthage, and inspired us at the time. Larry and I were rooming together. We were the only interracial roommates on the campus, maybe the first. I don't know. Larry was the campus radical. You know, it was pretty conservative campus back then, pretty lily white and so forth. But 1967, you know, that was the year that everything was happening counterculturally in the United States. The changing of philosophies about how we go about relating to one another, to politics, to assassinations, to everything else. Just decided that we were going to work with a group of other people, put together a literary magazine. And since I had access to the mimeograph machine, we ran it off at the student union, solicited input, literary input from the students. And at that time, we were putting something out every few weeks. So in March of 1967, we were just putting this out on the mimeograph machine. Then every few weeks. Then by December of 1967, the school decided to declare us an independent, recognized literary publication. That is, that they would recognize us. I don't know why we needed their recognition. A year later, then they actually published us. Newspaper, Crimson Arrow at the time, published us, and we became, I think, above ground at that time.
I came to Carthage from Chicago, from the south side of Chicago. And that was, yes, we graduated in 70. That's the class of 70. So in 66, there's only 13 of us in a population of about 1,300. But we were not the first black people on campus. I think historically there may have been one or two single individuals. But however, we were a testing ground for the whole campus. But the experience we had at Carthage and Centrique, it was a warming experience because now at that time, as Phil said, it was an underground, almost radical organization. This was the time in history when weekly, just about, there were protests against the war. This was the rising period of the civil rights movement. Those 4 years saw the assassination of Martin Luther King, saw the assassination in Chicago of Fred Hampton. So the alchemy was really rich and really intense. You could walk outside and you could not ignore the vibes around you.
Me and my roommate once, I think it was like right before the end of the first year of Centrique, we went in there and it was a disaster. I mean, there were 3-year-old ketchups in like this closet. So we went on this frenzy where we cleaned it out. And while we were in there, we found like the old issues, and we found almost one for every year. Like there were a couple missing, primarily the ones like the very beginning, but almost all of them were there. So I started going through and like reading all of them, picking out things that I thought would be good for the 50th, scanning them all, putting them all up on the website. So that's where you see them all now. And then creating this book, and I went ham over J-term, of like 2020, right? And thank God I did, because then like 2 months later, school was shut down for COVID.
It was interesting because like for me, I came in and all I knew was the e-board basically, because I had so little time to know what I had to do that I just had to click with everyone right away. But it was cool because there was no force clicking. It was like we all just got it, which was really special.
The best way I can describe it is Centrique. You are going to see a lot of ugly, a lot of scars, a lot of blemish. Typically with art, you put it in a museum if it's beautiful. It's on a display. There's a lot of beauty that you can honor and encapsulate in that, and that's why it's put on such a pristine level. We're not on that high of a level. We're underground. In the hospital, we're able to console one another, to provide therapy, to provide healing, to be able to cater to the needs of people. And while we can't guarantee that you'll come out of Centrique fully healed and fully ready to embrace the world, we can certainly be a space that you can go to seek better health.
It's taught me a lot about the people that I've worked with. I think when there's some kind of struggle to work through, it teaches you a lot about people. And the kind of people that step up during that process teaches you a lot about them. Like specifically Maddie had so much going on in her life and so many reasons to just check out and just say, I can't take on this responsibility right now. It's too much for me. But she continuously put in so much effort, even when she had a lot on her plate emotionally. And I had a lot of respect for her. And it was motivating in a way. If I didn't even consciously recognize it at times, it was motivating to see someone going through difficulty and still showing up and smiling and laughing at times and putting in a lot of work.
It affected my life, but actually making me want to stay at Carthage. There were a lot of things that I was struggling with at Carthage in the beginning and even throughout the year. And there was a really big consideration of me just dropping out before second semester. And I feel like literally, and like, I know it sounds maybe like exaggerated, but I feel like the only thing that really kept me grounded was Centrique. Especially, like I said, like that talk with Andrew and KJ, like, what are you doing? Like, you can't just base these problems as your definition of Carthage and everything that it is. So I feel like Centrique has made my life a lot happier. I feel like it's made me feel like I have a place on campus, and like there's a reason to stay, and that there are people out there who really do care about each other, even though the world sometimes just feels like it's so lonely and there's no one out there, but that's not true. And I think in the future, I want to keep that in mind, that you don't need to have like a million friends to find your place in the world. And sometimes, like when I look at people, I feel like I'm supposed to have a ton of friends, but just those couple of people that make an impact on your life, that's all you really need. And I'm going to take that with me and focus on strengthening the relationships around me instead of trying to go out and get involved in every single thing and trying to just make friends that aren't really my friends. They're just people I talk to, not like I have a close connection with or anything. I think some of my favorite nights were actually probably the nights Eva hated. To be honest. The long nights. Oh, yeah. I think that is my favorite because that's where we got to see like the real, true people, like the tired and the stressed out. And I think that's a great thing where you can be comfortable around people and be able to express that. And that's when you learn to rely on people. And I don't know, I just felt like that was really special. Like just being able to share in the stress and be like frustrated and everything, and just know that you still have support and you have people with you that will help you.
Well, I found Centrique through KJ. It was last semester, probably about this time, maybe a few weeks ago last semester. And I just recently gone through a breakup, and I didn't have a lot of friends on campus because I always commuted. So I would do my classes and then I would go home. And after that breakup, I realized, I was like, whoa, I'm totally disconnected from campus as a whole, which happens as a commuter. It's not easy. Come to campus, do her classes, and go home. And I think for a lot of people that commute, that's kind of the case, where you don't have a space on campus to build your new family away from home. And it was just KJ and Savannah at that point that I really started to connect with. And it was Poetry Underground, actually. There was like one Centrique meeting that happened, and KJ wasn't even the president at the time, but she kind of acted like it. And I was like, what is this thing? Like no one knows what's going on. And I was like, I'm interested in this thing, but it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And there was like no plan for publication at the time. And not to anyone's fault, but it was just there was no one passionate about it to make it happen. But I just came to Centrique with this idea for what I knew it could be on campus and what I knew it could offer to people and what it kind of offered for me. Poetry Underground first offered that, which was a place to be seen and heard. And KJ was really one of the first places. this could be really cool. This could be really big.
Oh, did it find me? I had no idea that it even existed. But I joined Poetry Underground my sophomore year and was just kind of having a blast. It was like me and 3 other people getting together, talking poetry, talking not poetry. And then at some point, spring semester, I think it was like right after spring break, Rick sent me an email and he was like, hey, this thing, Centrique, it's a fine arts magazine. We take submissions from people during the year and then we do a publication at the end. I want you to lead it because you've taken initiative in Poetry Underground. And I was just like, sir. So I guess at that point he was already talking to some other folks and talking to this rambunctious weirdo, Andrew. And then that's kind of how him and I met, was just in like the 3 weeks that Rick gave me to ask for submissions, put it all together, and then try and make some kind of publication.
I joined Poetry Underground because of KJ. We met in the chapel, me being loud and extroverted as I am, walk in there, of course making a ruckus, and she was like, hey, I know we see each other around the campus so many times, so I'm Tabitha, and she was like, I'm KJ, and I was like, great, we're best buddies from now on, you don't have a choice. And she was like, I'm part of Poetry Underground if you want to join. And then I dragged my best friend Taj to Poetry Underground, but we were a bit early. And guess who was there? Andrew. He was like, you should stay for Centrique. And I said, maybe not. I told Andrew, I was like, you know what? I'll stay for a meeting. And I convinced Taj to stay with me for a meeting. And that meeting turned to 2, then turned to 3, and then now here I am being the PR person of both Centrique and Poetry Underground.
Well, Centrique found me and I found it, actually kind of combining the two, because I actually I've been in no clubs. I'm a junior right now. I've been in no clubs my entire 3 years here. And my friend one day was just like, come to this meeting with me. And I was like, okay, don't really know much about it. I'll go because you want me to. And I went, and I was at the wrong time. And then, I was there for Poetry Underground, which is a completely different club, but I was like, you know what, I'm here for this, whatever, I'll try it. Well, I get in there, it's an hour early, and we see Andrew just in there on his computer, and then I was like, I'm gonna leave. I don't wanna be here, I wanna go home. And she was like, just stay, Well, I stayed, and he was like, oh, what are your passions? What are your interests? And I was like, nothing. I want to go home. I don't want to be here. I'm scared. I don't know you. Well, ended up being I basically just stayed for one meeting. I was like, I'll stay one meeting. If I like it, maybe I'll come back. Maybe I won't. We'll see. I ended up loving it. I was like, I'm going to come back. And then I came back to 1, 2, 3 more meetings, and I just decided to stay. And then now I'm on the e-board. I love it.
Well, I was in Poetry Underground last year for the beginning of the semester, but then I had a 6 to 9, so I couldn't really go into it. So I was going to do Poetry Underground again this year. And when I went to the booth to check it out, because KJ was there and me and KJ are buds, Centrique was at the same booth. And then I found out they were at the same meeting times. And there was a thing where Centrique was earlier and Poetry Underground was later, but I'm really bad at working around time, so I just showed up for Centrique, and then I was suddenly in it. So I guess it did find me rather than me finding it.
I found Centrique because of the org fair, the campus drive event where there were just a bunch of booths. And I wanted to be a part of something or see what was interesting. So I saw a lot of stuff, and I saw Andrew and KJ, our presidents, and when I went up to them, I said, oh, I'm into poetry. I write a lot of poetry. So I figured it would really be something I could mesh with and see, which then led me to Centrique, which was the literary magazine. Prior to my exposure to Centrique, I had no association with a literary magazine. I didn't really view it much of value. But once I started understanding the drive, the passion within the group, it became contagious, and where I felt like, yeah, I want to see the success of this magazine.
Okay, this is funny. I had just come back from my J-term trip to Europe, and that's where I met Andrew. And I didn't realize that him and KJ were like close buds, right? Until later on in the trip. And it had made me realize how much I missed her, how much I missed KJ. Because like, they're just such a fun and warm person. And I missed that. And so I was like, hey dude, like you wanna go out for lunch? And so I went to lunch in the caf, and him and KJ were there. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. Like, I haven't seen these people in so long. Because at that point it had been like 2 weeks since the trip had ended. And I sat down, and at first we were just talking about like random stuff. How was the trip? Like, what classes are you taking next semester? And then KJ was like, oh my God, Andrew, we need a graphic designer, and Eva does art. And I was like, are they not gonna like ask me if I wanna do this first? And then at first, I think Andrew was pretty skeptical, but after talking and stuff, I submitted my portfolio, and I also like made a few like test posters for open submissions. And I really didn't think I was gonna get the job. Like, I might draw and stuff, but I'm not a graphic designer. Like, I don't know how to turn like normal fonts into like bubbly letters on InDesign, or like format pages of a magazine. Like, I've never done that before. And so I just kept telling myself, like, I'm not gonna get it, so like I might as well just spend time on what they're giving me and like do my best. And if I don't get the job, I can still use it to show people my art. It was a lot of like back and forth communication. Probably around the end of February, I got the job. And I was really happy because like the minute I went into Centrique, it was the first time I'd ever been in an organization where I didn't feel like I was getting judged.
It was fun. It was really fun. I mean, it was small, right? Because, you know, it was me trying to bring it back to life. So it was mainly like, yeah, 2 of my roommates, a girl from like my creative writing class, 2 girls from like 2 or 3 girls from English department. And yeah, I mean, we had some really fun things with it. And I mean, obviously with the events, I think we would have liked to have done more, but I think that event it didn't have like a huge turnout, but I thought it was very successful for what it was. Like, I think everyone who did attend really enjoyed. And that's all I really wanted it to be.
And I'm like, wait, we could make Centrique happen again. And I came back and I was like, KJ, would you let me take presidentship over Centrique? And she was like, yeah, I didn't want it anyway. Rick kind of gave it to me, and I was like, yeah, take it, do it. And so we were sitting in a meeting with Rick, and KJ was like, oh yeah, by the way, Andrew wants to do the president for Centrique. And he was like, okay. And I was like, whoa.
You do not want to risk your own self-development neither. You must always try to remain and who are these people on the other side of the issue? And so one has to be careful. But yes, agitating, find out what you're going to agitate about. And at the same time, try to get more aware and read, and especially when it comes to literature. People are not reading literature these days. But yes, keep open. Realize that everybody has blood inside of them, and blood is a very warm thing. Terrence was a black Roman slave poet, playwright. He said, I am human and hence there is nothing human that is not my concern. And I think you can find that expression embedded in the religion at Carthage College and in the various religions throughout the world.
I personally would say that the club is very like connected and nurturing, honestly. Like I think that having like meetings, like general meetings or e-board meetings and all of the above, there's really just like this connection that comes from everyone in the club. So like it really doesn't matter no matter how bad of a day you're having, either way, when you come to the meetings, you kind of like have this home where it's like, finally I get to like be with people that love me, that care about me. So like having that like nurturing aspect almost, that like you could be having a terrible day and then you come to this meeting and then they kind of like just make you feel better. You know, they make you feel like you're loved and you cared about.
My connections with people increased exponentially. It didn't take some big step of like personally, individually reaching out to people. I just had to, this sounds cheesy, but open myself up to the opportunities that were already around me. And it really was a life changer.
You have all of these like bold personalities in Centrique, and they all come together, and it's like this mess that makes sense. I don't even know how to describe it. It is like this culture where it's a very welcoming culture, but we just have so many different personalities and people from different majors and backgrounds.
Some of us are silly and funny, and then some of us are like brooding and like solemn, and some of us are like did you read this yet? Did you read this yet? No, keeping on task, like getting things done. And some of us are like quiet, but still present. And so I think it's definitely different than any other org I've ever been in, because I feel like every other org, it's like you come together because you all share the same interests, whether that's through like shows you watch. Most of us have different paths we want to go on after graduation. And we have a lot of different interests, but the one thing that ties us together is that we all just really like either art or creating something.
It's like an organized chaos. It's like we encourage people to experiment, I think, and have fun. Like regularly Daniel with his QR codes. I'm like, Daniel, you don't have to do this the way I did it. I don't want you to do it the way I did it, but I want you to have fun with it and make it your own thing.
I feel like Centrique is striving to be more than just words and images on a page. It wants to tell a story, and that matters. Point blank period. Having a group of people that are not just advocates for themselves and what they care about, but advocates for other people to use their voices is really important. And I think sometimes that can get overlooked in organizations where they're like, okay, yeah, this org wants to do this thing, this org wants to do that thing. We're trying to have all of these events going on, whereas Centrique is more like, we want to hear what people are saying, how they're feeling, what they're creating. And I think that, above anything else, can tell the story and even be more of a historian type of aspect to whatever is happening over here in Carthage than any of those other organizations would be.
When I got to hear the founders come back and speak about why they created it, that was a moment where I was like, this is why it mattered, because they were talking about, you know, it was kind of a way for people to speak out in like almost a political way back then, like a way for people to just express creativity and, you know, actually be able to vocalize their thoughts on the current climate of the world. And, you know, it served as a really important outlet. And so I think that is probably why it is so important and why I'm so glad it's still living.
Originally, my vision was to just make a publication, to teach all the people that were interested in the magazine how we can do this, and figure out for myself, because at that point I didn't have like a clear plan. Like going into a production on something now, having all this experience, I would be like, okay, this is kind of a rough schedule we should meet. We should be ready for publication here. do all these things to prepare for it here, and just have a better idea of it. But going into this last semester, I had no idea of any of that. When I was originally going to graduate in December, I was like, okay, we should really try to push for a publication at the end of the semester. If we tried, that would have been rough. That would have been rough. And so I originally pivoted before I knew that I was going to stay longer. I was like, okay, I'll just help lay things down for the future for Centrique to publish in the spring. That's the best thing I can do, is build a foundation for Centrique to thrive after I leave. And so my thought was build a new foundation for Centrique to do better in the future, and build a place for people to feel welcome and seen. And so it started off teaching people about publication, journalism, editing, and then it expanded to, one of my favorite events was our workshop night, because I think that at its peak, those are the two things Centrique should do, is bring people together and have a thing that shows what happens when you come together creatively.
Me to find confidence within myself to really find areas where there was a need to be filled. Because a lot of people who are within Centrique have their expertises in certain aspects. I was just a freshman, and not that I have no expertise or no experience, but I certainly didn't have the experience or the knowledge in actually making this magazine. There's a quote that is from Just Wondering, which is Savannah Kroger's poem. It's basically asking all about what kind of art supply would encapsulate your personality and your role. And I chose the glue because for me, I felt like I was the invisible, the behind the scenes character who doesn't want things to fall apart, who wants to make sure that I could be able to fill in the gaps when needed.
I would say in the beginning, we all, except for I would say KJ and Andrew, we all didn't know what exactly we signed up for. Like, there really was no structure. We were making up our own rules and, you know, figuring it out. But once we got to like the groove of it, once we figured everything out, once we sat down and was like, hey, these are the roles and responsibilities that you need to get done, I feel like it was a lot easier for people to be like, I'm a rule follower, you know, so I can do that.
Well, when I first came into it, I just wanted to have something put together. I was like, I don't care if it's digital, I don't care if it's in hand, just something done, just to say that, you know, I was thrown into it, I figured out how to do it, I met cool people, and by the end of it, we had this little collection of what people had been working on. And it's kind of crazy to say that a year later, I want this to be more than I could ever dream it could be. Like, I want to think about it 10 years from now and be like, oh yeah, the people over at Carthage that are running Centrique now have taken it out of my hands. They've run with it. They've turned it into something that I never thought it could be, but it's great. I think as of right now, I'm trying to give us a place to at least start that and to do that. So having a physical publication and combining interviews, which we didn't do before, trying to somewhat resurrect like the unfortunately expired, like the current kind of like school newspaper that just died the same way we did, and just kind of incorporate that into here with what we're doing, and include more than just creative works and actually tell a story. I guess I'm just more curious what people are going to do with it after. It definitely takes a team. And at first, our team was 4 people. trying to throw something together, hope that it looked good, and call it. And that just didn't work that way, and we didn't feel like we were going to be giving the magazine justice by doing that.
Today, publishing is very different. The way we approach the written word is very different. And it amazes me, like, I watch a lot of videos in different areas, you know. I view on my computer. My last position was teaching computer science at a community technology center. And I had a lot of fun teaching young people, teenagers, teachers, professionals. This was around the early 200s. And I was able to bring the creativity to that particular platform. Today, one can self-publish, put out their own work via the computer. One can compose music. One could probably compose a whole opera, which is what I'm trying to do, via a computer.
Larry has never stopped writing. He's written all these years, and he oftentimes uses Facebook as the forum, and he'll put out poems on Facebook and so forth. Oh, I've got that. Hang on just a minute.
It means the center of something, one would almost say, but I kind of doubt that because.
Okay, this is from the introductory page of our first issue. Centrique is a mythological place in Hades where up is down and down is up. And then it says literature is the same in the world of art. Literature that is up to some may be down to others. Here we use Centrique as the name of an independently published magazine of literature designed to give writers a chance to display their work while promoting a creative atmosphere.
Yeah, I think, like I said, I do wish that I probably would have taken the approach that the original founders had, which is we just publish everything. Like, you just send it in, we publish it all. But, you know, prior experience kind of shapes what you do. So that wasn't the approach I took, but I really think that it's back on the right track, and I really enjoy that. But yeah, I hope people know that it was a passion project for everyone that worked on it, and that, you know, it was something that everyone found very important. And it's a very, like, personal thing, I think. You know, there's a lot of clubs, I think, that maybe don't have that aspect, but I think there's a lot of heart and soul poured into Centrique. And I really just hope that part continues on, like, for years and years. Just, you know, yeah. Again, I think that's part of the, you know, publishing everything that comes through is just getting more voices out, more heart, you know. And I think we try to show that with how involved we tried to be with the community. You know, COVID kind of set us back a little, just kind of a little rude of it. But, yeah. Does that kind of answer that? I feel like that's iffy, but
no.
I feel like if we have to start fresh, I'm gonna say, like, if we as, like, people we never met before and we're meeting up again, like, we're reliving our past, let's just say, and we're trying to figure this out again, or our future generation, someone's gonna do it. I feel like it's still a journey. Like, each journey is going to be different, and I just want people who work on the magazine to be proud of what their magazine is putting out. It's going to be a long, tedious process, long time reading. If you're not a reader, it's gonna suck. I'm kidding. And, like, getting people to submit, girl, it's hard. Just having random QR codes, even getting the library, like, send us an email saying that we're not allowed to scan QR codes that we don't know of. So, like, each of our journey is going to be completely different. As long as you love and appreciate the work that you're gonna put out, that's what I want from any groups, you know? Like, it doesn't matter if we're reliving the past, you know, starting over, or someone else, like some other group that are not similar to us at all. I just want them to be proud and like connect personally with the magazine. Yeah.
I tried to actually drop my position in March. I tried to drop my position from Centrique, and I had a meeting with KJ and Andrew, and they were like, what are you doing, Maddie? Like, why are you, like, we're so close. Why are you going to drop your position? And it wasn't even because of all the work. It was just like I felt like I wasn't contributing enough. And when they had that meeting with me, it made me realize how much they really care about their members. And it wasn't even like a meeting. It was like they said it like, it was more of like us hanging out and them telling me, like, trying to get me into that mindset of like, what's going on with you? Like, get out of your head. Like, you shouldn't be doing this. And after that, I kind of had this realization that they aren't just people in a club. They're actual friends that I have. And I was like, I didn't really recognize that. That, like, I didn't, like, think of these people as being friends. I thought of them as, like, just being part of a club. And not because, I guess I just didn't really understand the meaning of friendship. I didn't really have, prior to Centrique, friends my age. Most of my friends are literally in their, like, late 20s and 30s. So I haven't been, like, in a class with people my age since my sophomore year of high school. So it was interesting. I don't know, it was really eye-opening to see how much they really cared, and that kept me going, for sure.
Like, we talked about towards the beginning of the semester, fall semester, how we wanted something that emulated the culture of the campus, and I think that's why it matters, is that we need something on campus that showcases all the creativity that could be overlooked in classes, or maybe if someone's really good at writing but they're a math major, they can submit something, or if they're really good at art but they're like a history major, they don't have a way to like express that in their classes. So if we have a magazine, then we can showcase that and other people can look at it and we can have that sort of community building experience.
For me, the importance of the publication is as a memorial of current times and of the discussions and time spent together as a group, on top of being a marker of the cool creative things that people were doing on campus throughout the year. So for me personally, the publication is my way of remembering and hopefully continuing with the processes that started this year.
At times it felt fast, at times it felt really slow. There was a lot of time where we didn't know what we wanted, I think. And there was a lot of time where our graphic designer, Eva, wanted to do justice to everyone's ideas. And the unfortunate thing as a leader is you're going to have to put up with people not being happy all the time, and trusting that people will respect the direction that you choose to go in. Because as a leader, I think you have to really, you and I have had this conversation before, you have to be the one who cares most. You always have to be the one who cares the most. And I think the people that will respect you for that will recognize that you do care the most. And so the reason that it may have felt fast or slow is because we wanted to make sure everyone was on the same page and everyone was invested in the journey. So sometimes there were hiccups and we didn't all agree on something. And so that would slow things down. We were like, okay, how should each page look? What kind of graphics should we put? Should we have colors behind this? Should we not have colors? And I think what that kind of speaks to is that we really cared about each other's thoughts. Sometimes, I wouldn't say too much, but we cared about each other's thoughts so much that it slowed down some of our movement. But at the same time, I can't say that that's inherently a bad thing because it allowed everyone to be on board with what we did do. So not everyone was happy with the directions that we went in like individual things. You know, some people didn't like the matches on the pages. Some people didn't like the way the cover looked, the background on the cover. And everyone has their own individual things that they don't like about the magazine. And I don't mean to say that in a negative or toxic way, but that's part of working on a creative project with other people, is you're always going to have things that you didn't want there. But in order to maintain momentum and keep people excited, I think reminding people of that was something that we unfortunately didn't have the insight to do, which is, guys, no matter who you are in this publication process, there's going to be something that you don't like about this. And that's okay. But what that means is you should express your discontent, but at the same time, that also means that that gives space for other people to have what they want in the space.
I mean, obviously, my thing is just give your all to it, right? You're in college for a short amount of time, and your experience is going to be exactly what you make it. And Centrique made my experience so much better. Like, if I didn't have Centrique, I think I honestly would have been miserable. But being able to put my all into something and, you know, be proud to see it out there in the world, and, you know, making an important difference for people who want to create, and, you know, for people who were like me, that I think was so rewarding. And you'll always get the rewards, you know, if you're passionate about it, if you're putting your all into it, you're always going to see it. Again, even if it didn't continue on, I would have been happy with knowing that I did the most I could, right? And I think, obviously, I've talked about some of the mistakes I think I made with Centrique and getting it back off to a start. So I think, you know, just encouraging that creativity and that passion in anyone, you know, whether it's yourself or whether it's the people that are submitting to the magazine, I think that's really the critical piece.
It could look nice on your resume, but I don't know, to me, I want to be able to talk about it after I leave from here. Because a lot of people can be like, yeah, I did my undergrad here, and this is what I studied, and I did my thesis on this. But I don't know, I feel like in this world, those things aren't exciting anymore. Like, they're not something that people are like, oh yes, tell me everything about your thesis and everything that you learned in your classes. Like, even though it's relevant and something that makes people super happy to be in school, I feel like what leaves a lasting impression is what you do outside of those things. So like running an organization that you're super passionate about, where you make something and you publish something, you're like, yeah, well, I did this thing, but I didn't even know that I was interested in publishing anything or in like being a published poet. That's like one of my goals now, just from the past year of being in the org and writing and realizing that it's something that I really, really enjoy doing, and it's something that I could have pursued even further, even like a long time ago. So I think being able to be like, hey, yeah, my history and my English classes were great, but I did this really cool thing with this really cool set of people, and you can literally go and read it, and it's still happening. That's what I'm aiming for.
I think you need to practice the art. You can't just write a poem, say I'm a poet, but you need to write it, read it out loud, revise it, edit, do a lot of cross-outs, and work with it. And then the next day do the same thing, the next day do the same thing. It's like a music major at the college, they're not going to be any good if you don't practice. And so you really need to practice your art.
And I agree, learning as much as possible. I always ask my people to write a sonnet then. Go back into a sonnet. Here's a four-liner that I wrote. It's very short. Are you familiar with Imhotep? Imhotep is a magical but real live person from ancient Africa. He was a physician in one of the kingdoms. This is a four-line poem. I will never forget Imhotep. Imhotep is in my dreams. Whenever I think of Imhotep, I do not die. So go back and read, y'all, so you won't die.
Wow.